It began on a cold, forgettable Wednesday, the kind of day that feels hollow before it even ends. My little brother had just come home from school clutching a brightly colored box, his excitement buzzing like static. Inside was an elf on the shelf, its painted grin stretched ear to ear, frozen in permanent amusement. He placed it proudly on top of his dresser, announcing that it would watch us and tell Santa if we behaved. I had laughed at him, ruffling his hair. "It's just a toy," I said. "It can't watch anything." But he didn't laugh. He hugged himself tightly and whispered, "This one does." I shrugged it off. Kids get ideas. Kids scare themselves. That night, trying to unwind, I lay in bed, scrolling through my phone as the house settled into its usual nighttime quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the darkness itself is listening. Occasionally, a floorboard popped somewhere down the hall. I didn't think much of it. Old houses complain. But the next morning, something was wrong. The elf wasn't on the dresser anymore. It was sitting on my desk chair, facing my bed. I stared at it, that same little painted grin suddenly feeling aware. The angle of its head made it look like it was studying me. I called out to my brother, ready to tease him for trying to spook me, but he denied moving it. He even looked scared I suggested it. Day after day, the elf appeared somewhere closer, on the edge of my bookshelf, on my windowsill, on my nightstand directly beside my pillow, always angled toward me, always grinning. The smile didn't change, but something inside me did. The longer I looked at it, the more that grin felt hungry. My brother avoided the elf completely by then. Whenever he walked past it, he'd keep his eyes down and whisper a shaky sorry under his breath. Something in his fear twisted in my gut, but I tried to stay rational. Toys don't move, not on their own. Or so I kept telling myself. The night it moved, everything I thought I knew cracked open. I was lying in bed, the dim glow of my phone lighting my face. My eyelids were heavy, my breathing slow. Then, in the corner of my eye, I caught something so tiny, so subtle I thought I imagined it. A twitch. I lowered my phone, letting the room darken, my eyes adjusting. The elf was standing on the floor near the foot of my bed. Standing. I knew I hadn't left it that way. I held my breath, frozen, terrified that moving even an inch would draw its attention. And then it took a step. A small one, deliberate, the soft scrape of fabric brushing against the carpet. I wanted to scream, but terror anchored me. My chest tightened until breathing felt impossible. The elf approached the side of the bed and tilted its head slowly, as though evaluating me. A man-sized creature doing that would have been horrifying. Somehow, seeing that tilt on something so small, so childlike, was worse. Then I felt it pressure on my mind. Not words, but a sensation, a presence pushing its way into my thoughts, exploring them like fingers searching through a drawer. "I'm ready," something whispered in the back of my mind. I didn't know what it meant then, but I felt the intention behind it. Cold, patient, final. From that moment, sleep became impossible. I tried moving the elf, locking it away, even burning it in the fireplace. Each morning, it reappeared somewhere in my room, untouched, perfectly intact, smiling that same painted smile. By the third week, I slept on the couch downstairs. It didn't matter. I would wake up with it balancing on the armrest, watching my face with those fixed, soulless eyes. It learned my routine when I slept, when I woke, when I blinked. It studied me so carefully that some nights I could feel that painted grin even with my eyes closed. I knew then that this had nothing to do with Santa or behavior charts or innocent childhood stories. The elf wasn't a holiday tradition. It was something older, something that understood people far too well, something that waited, and it was waiting for me. The final night, I woke to its weight on my chest, so light, but so heavy in dread. Its face hovered inches from mine, grin stretched impossibly wide now, as if the pain itself were bending. Its tiny hands pressed against my collarbone. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. My body was a prison. Only my eyes could move, and they locked onto its unblinking ones. That pressure flooded my thoughts again stronger this time. Cold certainty settled into me like frost. It was done watching. It wanted to replace me, and as it leaned closer, its painted smile filling my vision, I finally understood the truth so many people ignore. The elf on the shelf isn't watching for Santa. It's watching for a chance to become you. The first flakes were barely noticeable, drifting lazily against the office windows, innocuous and almost charming. By the time anyone noticed them, it was too late. In a matter of minutes, the city outside had vanished beneath a monstrous wall of white, swallowing streets, cars, and streetlights in a blinding, swirling void. One moment the skyline was familiar, the next it was gone, replaced by an endless living snowstorm. We were trapped. It had started innocently enough, a casual office holiday gathering. The faint hum of music mingled with laughter, clinking glasses, and coworkers dancing awkwardly between cubicles. Some played silly games, others exchanged gifts with exaggerated cheer. I watched, amused, sipping my drink, when the lights flickered and the temperature in the room dropped. At first we laughed nervously. "Just a power surge," someone said. "It's fine," another reassured. But then the wind began to batter the windows. Not a normal gust, but a focused, deliberate force, scratching and scraping like icy claws testing the glass. Snow, impossibly heavy and fast-moving, pushed against the building as though it were alive, demanding entry. We tried to keep the mood light. Music played louder, drinks were poured, jokes told. But the small things began to unsettle us. A coat left behind in the break room. A half-drunk cup overturned without anyone touching it. Chairs sat empty, though the occupants had vanished. We joked at first, but unease crept through the office like a creeping frost. Then panic struck. People began disappearing, one by one, leaving only echoes of movement, whispers of laughter, tiny clouds of frosty breath hovering in the cold air. Doors would not open, elevators refused to respond, windows froze solid as though the storm had claimed ownership. Outside, there were no footprints, no tracks, only white nothingness, stretching endlessly in all directions. The corridors twisted in ways that made no sense. A familiar hallway would stretch endlessly, corners curved impossibly. Snow, once confined outside, now brushed against our faces, intruding, prying, cold fingers tugging at sleeves, trying to pull us toward the walls. Attempts to run were futile. Panic choked our voices. Screams echoed only to be swallowed by the roar of the storm. I saw one coworker vanish before my eyes. Mid-step, her eyes wide in frozen terror. A whisper of snow and she was gone. The silence that followed lasted only a heartbeat before the wind returned, pressing against our ears, rattling our bones. The office itself began to betray us. Desks, chairs, files, they dissolved into frost the instant we touched them. Floors gave way to pure white emptiness, a void that seemed alive, aware, hungry. By the time dawn broke, or what passed for dawn, the storm receded as abruptly as it had arrived. But the office, our sanctuary just hours before, was gone. There were no remnants of papers, laptops, chairs, nothing remained. Only a pristine expanse of white, untouched and absolute. The storm had claimed everything, and it lingered, beyond the windows, above the city streets, curling into alleyways and empty lots. It waited. It did not sleep. It did not tire. Patient, eternal, and ever hungry. We had survived, in the sense that some of us had lived to tell the story, but only because the storm had not yet decided we were its next meal. One day, it would return, and those trapped within would discover, too late, that the snow is not innocent. It watches, it waits, and when it moves, nothing stands in its way. I never planned on buying anything that night. The holiday market was crowded, loud, overflowing with cinnamon smells and twinkling lights. I only went because my friends insisted it was tradition, they said. But traditions never meant much to me anymore. I wandered away from them, weaving through stalls stacked with hand-carved ornaments, knitted scarves, and jars of spiced honey. Then I saw it. A small booth stood at the very end of the row. strangely quiet despite the noise around it. The vendor, an elderly woman bundled in a heavy wool coat, smiled when I approached. "Looking for something special?" she asked. Before I answered, my eyes had already landed on it. A nutcracker. Not like the whimsical ones you find in department stores. This one was antique, older than the market itself, it felt. Its wood was polished to a deep, warm sheen, and its uniform was painted in vivid reds and greens that hadn't dulled with time. Its face was carved with immaculate detail, stern jaw, noble eyes, a soldier's dignity frozen in miniature form. "It's perfect," I murmured. The old woman nodded, though something in her gaze flickered a moment of hesitation. "It chooses its owner," she whispered, barely audible over the laughter around us. Before I could question her, she placed the nutcracker gently in my hands. "Be sure to keep it somewhere safe." I smiled awkwardly, assuming it was just part of the sales pitch, and handed her the money. My friends teased me for buying something so old-fashioned, but I couldn't explain the odd pull I felt toward it. I took it home, placing it on the mantel above the fireplace, letting the golden glow from the flames shine across its polished face. I didn't know then what I had invited inside. That night, sleep came easily, too easily. I drifted off with the image of the nutcracker still lingering in my mind. But hours later, something carved its way into my dreams. A sound. Faint, precise. The soft click of wood against hardwood. Clack, clack, click. My eyes opened instantly. The room was washed in pale moonlight, shadows stretching across the walls. At first, I saw nothing. Then, in the corner of the room, near the doorway, something shifted. The nutcracker. I blinked hard, rubbing at my eyes. "No," I whispered. "I must have moved it and forgotten." But I hadn't. And when the clicking sound resumed, steady, rhythmic, purposeful, the truth was undeniable. The nutcracker was walking, moving with small, rigid steps, its carved boots tapping the floor with unnatural precision. Its painted eyes turned toward me. The expression hadn't changed, yet the stare held a depth I hadn't seen earlier, a silent, unwavering judgment. Fear tightened around my throat. I tried to get out of bed, but the house felt wrong. The hallway outside my room seemed to stretch impossibly long, the shadows too dense, the angles sharper. As I fled, the walls seemed to shift subtly, funneling me, guiding me into corners where darkness pooled. Every time I turned, it was there. The nutcracker never rushed. It didn't need to. It pursued, with chilling patience, appearing at the end of each corridor, jaw snapping open and shut with a cracked wooden clack. Its movements were eerie, almost ritualistic. The more I ran, the faster it seemed to anticipate my path. It was hunting me. But why? I wasn't a child, not someone needing protection. And then, in a moment of terror, the truth slid into place like a blade. This nutcracker wasn't meant to bring cheer. It was a guardian old, bound by a forgotten oath to protect children from monsters. But something had twisted that oath, curdling its purpose. To the ancient spirit inside, I wasn't a guest. I was the monster. Its cold wooden gaze pierced through every flimsy barrier I threw in its way. Chairs, bookcases, even locked doors. Nothing stopped it. Its carved fingers scraped across walls, leaving grooves in the paint marking its steady pursuit. By the time dawn broke, I had cornered myself in the living room, trembling behind the overturned couch. The nutcracker climbed onto the cushions with mechanical precision, its wooden face hovering inches from mine. Its eyes glowed faintly, not with warmth, but with judgment sharpened through centuries. The painted jaw opened. Clack, clack, click. I understood then that nothing I did mattered anymore. The curse embedded in the wood wasn't decorative lore or market folklore. It was real. Real enough to stalk, real enough to judge, and real enough to destroy. The nutcracker wasn't satisfied until I collapsed before it, breathless, broken, defeated. Only then did it step back, as if acknowledging a victory won long before I entered that quiet market stall. Now, as I sit here in the wreckage of my own home, I can't help but wonder how many others have unknowingly invited such a guardian into their lives. How many fireplaces display decorated soldiers with spirits bound behind painted smiles? How many more will be judged? Because the truth is simple, merciless, and absolute. The Nutcracker doesn't protect children. It protects its oath. And the next person to take one home may be the next target.